everybody, welcome back to the Claremont Classic Garage. Got the headphones on because the impact gun is a whaling. I want to make a video about fixing up our springs, but I didn't want to start making it till I knew I could get all the bolts out. And yeah, no worries, they just all came out lickety split. Now that they're out, you could see the rubber in the bushings is starting to deteriorate. So we're going to go ahead and put a set of bushings in it while we're at it. Yay, more fun. But hey, now's the time to do it, right? Well, that's this spring all apart. This is the one that's been apart before. It might not be as much fun getting that one apart, but we'll find out. I'm going to go in the house now. It's coffee time, so I'm going to go have a cup of coffee, and I'm going to look up some parts, and we'll go from there. Here's all the parts of the left spring. They've been apart, cleaned up. Deb's got paint on one side of them. When it dries, we'll flip it over, paint the other side, put it together, put it in, blah, blah, blah. I've got to wait a day or two for the bushings and stuff to show up. And once I've got this one all back together and I'm kind of satisfied with how it went, I'll show you, we'll do the other side, the right spring, step by step, take it apart, clean it up, put the new clamps and stuff on it and get it back in. As you can see here, our, in quotations, dry run spring is all together and back in the truck. So now I know that my procedures are going to work. Let's do this one together. So first thing we got to do is get the center bolts out of it. This spring has never been apart. Whoops. So we've got the old Nitro Cat gun. And we'll see if we could get the nuts off these center bolts without having to get the torch out. If we got to get the torch out, we got to get the torch out. Oh, look at that. Oh, it's not the bolts out there. Wow. Well, let's see if we get lucky with this one too. All right. The hardest part isn't getting the nut off, the hardest part is getting the nut out of your socket. There we go. Now I'll get the air chisel out and we'll see if we can get these center bolts pushed out. Well, here we go. You might want to turn your sound down just for a minute. All right, now we can start getting our pieces off. This little shim, that's important. We'll make sure we get that back in. Okay, now we're going to switch to the Oh, I might be able to push them a little further right here. Yeah, there we go. Good. See all these? These are zinc. They're supposed to be between the springs. Our other spring, they were all long gone. So I guess we'll leave them out on this side too. Next thing we're going to do is cut these old clamps off. Then we'll air chisel that rivet. Watch your ears. There's one. I'll get the other one and I'll be back. I had to grind the heads off of these to pop the clamps off. Now I'll cut them off again and we'll pop out the rest of them. The next step is to get all these off. We'll be replacing them. They're pushed in from this side and then they've got a wedge pushed up from the bottom. The new ones we got are a one-piece style. So to get these out, you just, right in the center, you knock the pin out with a punch. And then the rest of it comes out this way. Let's see if we can. There, see? And then we flip it over, and out comes the... Out comes the rest of it. Here's the little wedgie thing they put in there. So we'll get all of those out, and then we can push the bushings out of the main leaf. Here's our main leaf. Now you can see the bushing on this end. It's got a flange. Here's the new one. So that stops it. That seats. But what they do on the back side of it once it's through, it's hard to see here, but they peen it over to lock it in place, which makes it kind of difficult to get the damn things out. So there's a couple of ways around this. We can attempt to kind of unpeen this side and push it out that way, or we can cut this flange off and push it through that way. It depends how you feel like doing it. To get rid of this, you can kind of use a hammer and chisel and push it in. You could even, if you had a way of holding it all, this is exactly 2 inches. You could possibly go down in there with a 2-inch hole saw and cut that off. The spring is hard. It won't cut that. It'll cut the bushing, but it won't cut the spring. So you can see here, I went in with the hole saw, and I didn't really cut it right out, but I cut enough of it out that I weakened it, because it's thinner now. I just go around with a chisel and push it all back in, and then we'll take it over to the press and see if we can push it out. Alrighty, so this piece of pipe is the right size so that it supports the spring, but lets the flange of the bushing pass through. This is a piece of metal I've turned down to exactly 2 inches. And let's see what happens here. It's not exactly straight. If I don't like what it looks like when I start pushing, we'll stop. This is a 20-ton press. You need at least this much to do this job, I would guess, because these things get in there pretty good. There we go. Let's see if she goes pop. There it goes. Look at that. And there you can see it. So I'll finish it up and do the other one. There we are. The old bushings are out. Something that bears mentioning at this point. You can mark all this stuff when you take it apart if you want. But these springs are somewhat symmetrical. The only thing that they have here, the second leaf has got a point on the end. I would assume that because when these are sent to the assembly line, they've got a shackle on one end, so the point means front. But the springs are symmetrical, so it's not that all critical that everything goes back pointing the same way it was. Now we've got all this stuff disassembled, we can move the operation outdoors and get the grinders and stuff out and clean all these parts up, and we can get them painted. This part of the procedure is pretty straightforward. We'll just get our the old Black & Decker grinder with a 24 grit disc, and we'll just get all these parts cleaned up. Then we can get a coat of paint on them. Now we're going to put the clamps on. Of course, they go on from this side, but I want to show you the problem with them from this side. They're not exactly bent really good, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to the anvil, flatten them back out. We're going to get them riveted onto the leaf. Then we'll temporarily bolt the spring pack together, heat these up, and form them really nicely around here so everything goes together perfectly. I've got this little thing here. You can see it's got kind of a radius cut into it, and that supports the rivet, the round head of the rivet. You stick that up through the hole here. You can see there's a little bit of a countersink there, and we pound the rivet down into there. You just get a big ball peen hammer, and you just keep working it and working it and working it, and eventually you'll get it flattened right out. And when it won't flatten out anymore, there'll probably be some sitting up proud. You just grab an angle grinder and clean that off smooth. All right, let's see if we can catch a little bit of it anyway. Not much to it. This is how they used to build battleships. Just hit straight down on it. There we go, perfect. Now we're going to stack these three leaves together and put some temporary bolts through them, and we can heat these up with the torch and get them formed around so they're nice and tight and keep the leaves from doing this. So you can see what we've done here. The springs are bolted together in the center there with some temporary bolts. And I've got the ends of them clamped together, and we've gone down and made sure our leaves are all lined up. All nice and parallel from one end to the other. Now, we're going to heat this up and wrap it around there. Nice and perfect. First, we just have to make sure it's square, and it's not quite square. There. Let's go. Little blacksmithing. We'll get this baby good and hot so she bends easy. You could probably do this cold. You just have to work at it slow and be careful you didn't loosen up the rivet with all the beating and banging, right? that, and we'll repeat times 4. There we are. Let that cool off for a bit, then I'll take it all apart and we can start painting. That looks good, doesn't it? That's the bottom side of everything done. And then once that dries, I'll flip them over, hit the other side. While we're waiting on paint, I'm going to teleport myself into the other video where we're getting all the stuff ready to put the back end of this truck back together. Well, there we are. We just got to wait for the paint to dry, and we can put them together. Now we can start putting this spring together. I've got our bushings set up, and we're just going to kind of get them started in a little bit, just so they stay put while we're carrying it over to the press. And then we'll take it over to the press and push them in. Now, I don't feel like moving the table of the press, so we have to press it most of the way down like this. And then we'll set it up on top of a piece of pipe, because the bushing actually sticks out the other side. But for now, this will get it most of the way home. I miss the press we used to have at work that had the foot pedal, you know. It was a pneumatic press. Pneumatic over hydraulic. Worked great. 100 ton. But I'm not at work anymore. Okay, there we go. That's it. She's hit bottom. There we go. There, she's home. Now we need to stake the bushings so that they don't come out. So I've realized now you can just do it with a flat punch. Just got to do that. So the bushing can't back out of its form. So we'll go around in a few spots and do that, and we'll be all set. Now we can start building them up. This is our first leaf under the main leaf, or I guess you could call it the second leaf. So we're going to put our insert on, and then I just put a little silicone grease on them. Then the same thing on this guy. Now we can start actually building from the bottom up. So we got our 2 center bolts here. I'll put a little anti-seize kind of that far up. It'll end up with a lot more on it, but that's good for now. I'd like to be able to take these apart again if I ever decide I need to, for any reason. Then we've got our 2 bottom spacers. This has got the pilot hole that lines up with the pin in the top of the axle. I think the pin is actually supposed to be in this and go into the hole in the axle, but it seems to be stuck in the axle, so whatever. And then we got this goes on next. It's got 2 spacers on the bottom. There. Now we're going to put on the I don't even know what you call it. It's the very bottom leaf. It's the super leaf. It's the one that once the springs go completely flat, it's the one that they sit on, and which keeps it from breaking the overloader springs on the top. This guy! This big beast goes on the bottom, and you'll see it's flat on one side and kind of arced on the other side. The flat side goes up. I'll show you in a sec. Let's see there. You can see the bottom of it's kind of got an arc. That's the bottom. Now I'll get a little more anti-seize on and we're going to move to the floor. Okay, so here we go. Next, this guy goes on. It doesn't really have a front and a rear. Like I said, it's symmetrical. So, on it goes. Next goes this one. And like I said before, the pointy end goes to the front. There we are. And then our main leaf goes on like that. Whoa, don't tip over. It's starting to get heavy. I know what I got to do here, people. There. That'll keep it from tipping over. Okay, now this guy goes on. I need more anti-seize. Oh yeah, lots of anti-seize. That goes on. Now, our overloader springs are going to go on now. First, the first one that goes on is the one with the holes in the ends, and we have to slap a couple of liners in there. Then there's a little 1/8 thick spacer that goes in between. And then the top one goes on. Perfect. Then we can run our nuts down. No washers. We won't torque these till it's the spring is back attached to the truck. But for now we can run them down, just kind of sort of snug them up. Just like that. And now we're going to put our shackle on. When you rebush these, you have to buy new shackles because the original ones from the factory, you'll notice these bushings have an outer sleeve, but the original factory shackles do not have a factory sleeve. Basically the shackle is the outer sleeve. But these ones, I guess you could replace that bushing if you could spec something out. But anyway, doesn't matter. So we're going to slather this up with anti-seize and put it in. We're not tightening anything for now. None of these bolts can be tightened until the thing is back on the floor with weight on it. Because we don't want to torque these bushings in a deflected state. We want them in a completely neutral position when the bolts are torqued. There we go. And this bolt goes in from the back, so we have to put it in now because we can't get it in once the thing is on the truck. All right, that was fun. We got these things hung back on the chassis. Now what I'm doing is I'm just kind of clamping these 3 leaves together so that we make sure we've got them, we can keep them all lined up nicely so that when I torque these bolts over here, we can get everything lined up as nicely as we can. So we'll see how far I got to run this down. These are 1/2-inch fine bolts. Theoretically, you should be able to torque them to about 80, but I found on the other side anything past 65, and they started feeling kind of spongy. So that's fine. we'll just stick with 65 and let the U-bolts do the rest. I've got everything lined up and torqued up. Now the next thing we have to do with these are the rubber blocks that the overloader springs contact. And you can see here, they're all starting to delaminate from the steel backing. This one's really bad. So we're going to replace them. You can see here, these things are all rotted away. I was going to get 4 new ones till I found out they were $37 each at the dealer. And then I said, I don't need them that bad. Let me see if I can find an alternative. So I found these at Energy Suspension. Unlike those rubber things, these are polyurethane. And unlike these with the metal part exposed at the back, on this, all the metal is completely encased. So they should be much more resistant to rotting. And although they seem smaller, they're actually just fine for what we're going to do with them. So we'll get those zipped on, and then it'll be time to, I think, lift the axle up. So there you go. Those things go right on and replace the factory ones perfectly. Uh-oh. Bob wants to go home. Hang on. Hold everything. Bob. Bob is full. Well, here goes nothing. Up she goes. Well, we've got it up in position. Now we're going to get our U-bolts on. Always a good idea, especially if you live in the Rust Belt, to replace the U-bolts when you take axles in and out. I know, yes, we've all gotten away with it many times. I know I have, but especially in the Rust Belt, when you take these things off, it gnarls the threads all up, and you don't know who's been at these things before you, blasting on them with a 3/4 impact gun or something. It's just for what they cost. It's cheap insurance. Put new ones, torque them up according to factory spec, and you'll be good to go. Alrighty, so get our U-bolts on. Then I gotta go look at my book and figure out what they're supposed to be torqued to. I've run the nuts down the U-bolts just to take up the slack and kind of hold it together. Now we're going to get the crane out of the way and get the thing jacked up and get the weight of the truck sitting back on the stands. I don't know if it matters or not, but I would like to have a little bit of weight sitting on everything when I tighten the U-bolts, because that will be scrunching the springs down too. These U-bolts torque up to 110 foot-pounds. I'm going to do it in 2 stages. I'm going to torque them up to 60 first and get everything just kind of equalized, and then we'll go from 60 to 110 in a crisscross pattern. They look a little funny. Some of them have more sticking out than the other because these U-bolts were made by the guy at the spring shop, so they're not always exactly perfect, but that's fine. It's all good. Now that that's all done, you can see how much better these springs look. Before, there was all scabs, rust scabs built up in between them, and there was gaps, especially on the overloaders. There was, I think on this end, they were about 3/8 of an inch apart. That's no good. If they would have ever hit there, it probably would have broken it. But now, everything's together. It's going to work properly. And that, I think, is about as much as I'm going to do for now. Once the thing is back on its wheels, I'm going to take it outside, and I've got 2 barrels full of calcium chloride on skids. We're going to sit on the back of it here to simulate the weight of the box and stuff like that. It's already got a full tank of fuel in it. And then once that's done, we can pretty much assume that'll be ride height. And we'll torque up all these bolts, and I'll show you what we're going to do with these clamps. Well, that'll do it for next time. That was a lot of work. These damn things are heavy, man. But it was a job worth doing. And thank goodness now it's behind us. It's done. Anyway, I'd like to thank you, as usual, for tuning into our channel and continuing to support us. And until we meet again, this is Kevin saying so long from the Claremont Classic Garage.